Joe Biden's going to come in fourth. So he has no energy on the ground. You're confirming it now. When I've been in Iowa several times during this election cycle, you couldn't find a Biden supporter if your life depended on it.
Despite the lack of results, the Young Turks host, Cenk Uygur, has already made his call on one of those last night's results.
Indeed, and he's coming with us now to expand on that and the Iowa Democratic Party's bungling of this entire thing. Great to see you, Cenk.
Great to see you guys. Yes. So look, it looked like based on everything that Joe Biden was going to come in fourth, and then Bernie Sanders' team revealed some results, and it looks like Joe Biden is, according to those results, come in an embarrassing fourth, almost passed by Amy Klobuchar. If he'd come in fifth, his campaign might be totally over.
Right, and Cenk, you were talking about this in the break. You saying you think that progressives got screwed the worst out of this thing. Why do you think that debacle has particularly hurt Bernie and the progressive wing of the party?
So last night should have been glorious. It should have been the beginning of the progressive era. If Bernie Sanders' internal numbers are anywhere near right, he's won by 5 points, got up to almost near 30%, which is a threshold where people say, wow, that's a big, big win. And he should have gotten a ton of press out of that. And remember, guys, Iowa is not about the delegates. They have a small amount of delegates that get split up between different candidates. It's about the press attention. Right. So that's what we were all waiting for. And now that gets totally stolen from Bernie Sanders if it turns out he's the winner. By the way, we're fair, unlike the other side. If it turns out Pete Buttigieg won, then he got screwed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so whoever won the Iowa caucuses, their thunder was stolen, their moment in the spotlight, and the whole reason for a year they spent in Iowa got totally taken away from them because of, as usual, the total, utter incompetence of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I will say, though, that I was color me skeptical that the media was ever going to give him a victory lap if he did ultimately win. They would have talked about the number 2 place or, Biden's in a strong fourth or whatever. They would have found some way to dismiss the results of Iowa. But I think you're absolutely right in your analysis. I also think it's really interesting, Cenk, because we keep hearing from the experts, crowd size doesn't matter, enthusiasm doesn't matter, Twitter's not real life, so just discard all the energy and enthusiasm you see behind the Sanders movement. And last night, look, again, we don't know all the results, but it looks like he had a very strong night, that he turned down some of those new voters that they've been reaching out to, that they've been trying to bring into the process. So in a lot of ways, just your gut instinct and trusting the fact that if you see one campaign that has tons of energy and another one that is sort of flailing around and can barely fill a middle school gymnasium, that's something worth paying attention to.
Look, what you're saying is the most obvious thing in the world. The only reason you deny that is if you're massively biased, like every single person in the mainstream media. I mean, who looks at someone that's got a giant crowd and someone who has no crowd and goes, I think the guy with no crowd is the leader. I think he's wonderful. And a guy with the giant crowd, ignore him. I mean, they're so insanely biased, they can't see straight. So I read a Washington Post column on air the other day, or last night actually, that said that when Bernie got in the race, that his crowd sizes would dwindle and his old hits would be played on oldie stations. I mean, who's this moronic? Oh, I know. Every single person in the mainstream media who's never met a real person in their lives. They all their little bubbles. Hey, millionaire friend, what do you think? Oh, I think Mike Bloomberg's a wonderful Democrat. What do you think? Yeah. Of course. Okay, so yeah, of course we're winning. Even when we win, this kind of crap happens. And look, guys, one more thing about the debacle last night. This is not an isolated incident. It happens all the time. It happened in Kansas. I'm not even convinced Brent Welder lost in Kansas, a progressive Justice Democrat candidate in a primary to Sharice Davids. He was winning. There's a glitch. They take forever to figure out what happened and then come out and go, it turns out the progressive candidate didn't win, the establishment candidate did. Okay, fine. All right. Well, give us some transparency. No, we won't tell you who created the app. We won't tell you how we count the votes. What do you mean you won't tell us? It's just the most outrageous thing I've ever heard. In Iowa, Des Moines Register asked 4 days ago, who designed the app that's going to count the votes? They're like, nope, it wouldn't be fair to the company because they might come under scrutiny if we tell you. Are you guys insane? That's not how a democracy works. Giving away our elections to private companies that are designing apps. Now it turns out there's a company called Shadow. That seems so comforting. And then, and then there are now reports from Intercept, HuffPost that Buttigieg might have paid for the app in part. That seems so outrageous that even I can't believe it. Or that a Democratic super PAC might have been involved.
Yeah,
No,
the whole
no,
thing is crazy.
the darkness. I heard that from the Washington Post. And you having these votes in the darkness is insanity.
It is total insanity, Cenk. One thing I want to get your read on, I mean, you're right. Now either Bernie or Buttigieg has been robbed of the bump that they deserve in New Hampshire. So as it currently stands, Biden is actually second there, according to the Real Clear Politics polling average at 17.8%. Do you think people are going to see through his veneer and that he'll have that collapse, given the, the still limited but short media narrative that will inevitably result if he gets fourth?
Absolutely no one believes in Joe Biden, including Joe Biden. I mean, no matter what happens, he tells everybody in the audience, don't vote for me. They're like, hey, Joe, is the election on Monday or Tuesday? Don't vote for me, right? What? So John Kerry doesn't believe in him. Barack Obama doesn't believe in him. The donors don't believe in him. Man, if you've lost the donor class and you're Joe Biden, you got nothing left. And so that it looks like that's what happened. And guys, there's another phenomenon that's really important about polling. Polling usually is not as scientific. I wish it was, and I believe in science, and I want to believe in polling. But it's not quite as scientific as people make it out to be because they poll people willing to take polls. That in itself is a giant problem with the data you get from polling.
Right.
Unlikely voters are very unlikely to sit through a 23-minute poll, which means that people like Joe Biden, even if their polling is weak or middling or strong, whatever the number is, it's still inflated. Because unlikely voters are going to go to outsiders like Bernie Sanders and, yes, by the way, Donald Trump. That is why the polling has been consistently off about both of those candidates and always to their detriment. And so, and guys like Biden, you get a bump from 68-year-olds who are wonderful American citizens that always vote and that always answer polls and that like Joe Biden. And so, it looks like he's polling in second in Iowa, but it would not be remotely surprising to find out that that's wildly off, and he actually came in fourth, and now it looks like maybe close to fifth.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I was just taking a look at the Real Clear Politics average in Iowa had him up at 19%. Judging by the indications what the Sanders team released and also just what we saw on the ground, he's going to be probably 6-7 points under that mark. So very much underperforming the average of polls, although pretty consistent with that Des Moines Register poll that they didn't release, which is a whole other story. I mean, Cenk, the last thing I wanted to ask you about is Pete is claiming victory very confidently. They're cherry picking data to release to paint this picture of, look, we did magnificently. We're leading going into New Hampshire. Do you think that's the right move for him?
Well, so let's be very clear, because we don't know what the results are right now. And we are, as progressives, incredibly fair. That's the whole point of being a progressive. So if Pete Buttigieg won, he totally got screwed. And everyone should come out and do a big thing about it, because the whole point of Iowa is to figure out, who won after a year of campaigning there. And if it was Pete Buttigieg, he should get more credit than just the results being released on the middle of a random Tuesday afternoon. Okay.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if he lied and said that he was, quote, victorious when he didn't win, well, then he should be in for a world of criticism. What kind of a cheeseball goes out there and says that they were victorious when they didn't win? So it's not me. I don't know the numbers. Nobody knows numbers.
Right.
And I don't know that the candidates know the numbers. But you know what happened? Immediately after Buttigieg says that, AP had an article with a giant column that said Buttigieg declares victory. And that got sent to every paper in the country. So now Buttigieg, he probably thinks he's really clever, saying, well, if I just say I won, the press is on my side, they'll all report that I won, and they won't even care about the numbers. And I'm not saying that all the press did that. It looks like it half worked. But will the press come back if it turns out he didn't win and say, oh, it turns out Buttigieg is a liar, And look at this thing blowing up in his face. It's like somebody putting up a mission accomplished sign behind him when we don't know the results.
Yeah.
Well, and you can only imagine the sort of scorn they would heap, rightfully so, on Donald Trump if he did something similar.
Or Bernie, frankly.
Yeah.
If either of these candidates did that, they would be completely toast. So,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, last thing, guys,
Yeah.
it's a new phrase, peak victory. When you declare victory after you've lost, like the 49ers have declared a peak victory.
Yeah, right.
So we don't know yet. We don't know yet. To be fair, if Buttigieg won, he got screwed. But if he didn't, world's largest cheese ball.
Yeah.
And let's the press calls him out for being a liar.
Well, we certainly will. I know you will, too. Thank you, Cenk.
Thank you,
for joining us.
Cenk. Great to see you.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Next on Rising, he was with us last night for those 2% reported results. Friend of the show, Michael Brooks, rejoins Rising. That's next.